Greetings from the planet of Brooklyn. This week's edition of the Payday Podcast, we will be interviewing Dequi Odinga, wife of the political prisoner Sekou Odinga. Please go check out the Sekou Odinga Defense Committee at sekouodinga.com. You could also email them at info@sekouodinga.com. You can also like them on Facebook. And please check out the Freedom Ain't Free CD. I got a chance to listen to it yesterday, and it was awesome. A lot of good talent on there. Very educational, and is as entertaining as it is educational. And it is very, very educational, folks. A lot of gems being dropped, and a lot of talent, muscles being flexed. So please go over there and check them out at sekouodinga.com. And if you like this, please like it, share it. If you hate it, comment. If you like it a lot, comment. If you like it a little bit, comment. If you don't have anyone to talk to, please comment. And please share this, as they say, each one teach one. And one final last thank you to Juice, the MC, for his help with the technical side of things. I'm not really well versed, and we had some technical difficulties partway through the interview, but Juice cleaned it up, and thank him for that. And also peace to those who we lost on 9/11, and shame on those who benefited. I'm out.
Welcome everyone to the Payday Podcast. In this episode, we'll be interviewing Dequi Odinga. Am I saying that correctly?
Well, my married name is Odinga. I use Keone Siddiqui. My last name is Keone Siddiqui.
Keone Siddiqui.
But I am married, so to Sekou Odinga, so that would make me Dequi Odinga.
Dequi Odinga. Okay, cool. Got you. All right. So, you are part of, what's the name of your organization? What are your, who's a part of it with you? Who helps you? And what are your, some of your short-term and long-term goals?
Well, I'm a part of several organizations. The primary one is, all of my work centers around U.S. held political prisoners and prisoners of war. Those are people who are in prison on the basis of their political beliefs, although the United States says that there are no political prisoners, and they teach people that there's freedom and democracy and, in this, quote, land of the free and home of the brave, end quote. But there are lots of U.S. held political prisoners and prisoners of war, and primarily they started with, in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, the revolutionary struggles that were happening in this country, modeled after what was going on around the world. In the 1950s, 60s, lots of African nations were winning their independence from colonialism. And so, people inspired here joined revolutionary struggles. And from that is where we have U.S. held political prisoners and prisoners of war. But I also like to say that, as Dr. John Henrik Clark said, one of our great historians, that we must first remember that we came here en masse as political prisoners. When they kidnapped us, African people, and put them on the ships to sell them, as human cargo around the world, we didn't come here by choice. We came here as a manifestation of the politics of capitalism and imperialism. We came here against our will. And so, as Dr. Clark said, we came here as political prisoners, but then there's that distinct category of people who took up revolutionary beliefs and ideas and actions to fight against the oppression that enslaved us from the beginning. So when I talk about U.S. held political prisoners and prisoners of war, that's what I'm talking about, those people. And today that has extended into the so-called war on terror, and so people who are Muslim and, Muslim nationals or Arab nationals who are being held in detention camps across this country for no other reason other than the so-called war on terror, and because they're Muslim.
Okay, that brings up an interesting question. This is going to be one of the times where I kind of venture off a little bit. But post 9/11, we have like the Patriot Act and stuff like that. And, of course, in the 70s, there's a lot of documentation of COINTELPRO and how all the different sorts of, what is that called? security,
government agencies, right?
Yeah, and all the different things that they did in surveillance, all the different surveillance that they did on us. And now, with Snowden and stuff like that, we see that they do that
to everybody.
See, now everything that you do is recorded. That would be great if we could go into COINTELPRO, because I know a lot of people don't know about it. I like the COINTELPRO. I also wanted, the last question you jumped into when you were jumping into the Black Panther Party and the the armed patrols and stuff like that. I think that's interesting because I would imagine you have a lot of your husband being an ex-Black Panther. You have insight into that, because even though we have books like the Black Panther Speaks, which opens up the newspaper that the Black Panthers had, and different things like that, to have that how that relates to the community, especially you being from Brooklyn, and I would imagine you were here for a while, so so we can go into that. That'd be great. So COINTELPRO, let's talk about it.
So COINTELPRO was around for a while before the 1966, when the Black Panther Party was created. But because there were thousands of young people who had joined the Black Panther Party, particularly on the heels of the rebellions that rocked this country, which rebellions, just like in Ferguson, have always been sparked by just one too many police murders, right? These killer cops that go around killing and shooting, and at that time here in New York, especially throwing black boys off rooftops. And so the rebellions, Lyndon B. Johnson was facing the voting rights, right? The civil rights movement, people pushing for integration. I can go where I want to go. I can eat where I want to eat. They was not, and in the South, people was fighting for the right to vote. Well, he was ignoring that. But the rebellions changed all of that. Because there were cities from Cincinnati to Philly to Los Angeles, Watts, New York City, all over the country where black people were catching, were being oppressed. They had rebelled. And so they said, okay, well, we need to do something. Let's give them this crumb, this voting rights. So he finally signed that. And that was when the civil rights movement was able to get all its credit for doing that, because that was the alternative to what was happening in Ferguson. Like, imagine what we saw happening in Ferguson was happening all over this country. They couldn't have that, so they needed to quiet the people. They needed to quiet people down, so they gave them the civil rights movement, and they started bigging up the civil rights movement, because in the beginning they was calling Martin Luther King an outside agitator. He was a communist. He was a troublemaker. None of these things that they call him today, right? Today he's revered, right? But he was the alternative to the grassroots, the people who were in the street organizations that today is called the Bloods and the Crips, but then they were called the Slawsons, the Blackstone Rangers, right? All these other street organizations, and just what people call the lumpen, the people who were unemployed, underemployed, had nothing whatsoever to lose. Those are the people who joined the Black Panther Party. And as a result of thousands of people joining the Black Panther Party and chapters opening up across the country where there weren't any chapters, J. Edgar Hoover, who was the director of the FBI for something like 40, 50 years, he's like, we got to stop this. So it was a counterinsurgency program that targeted the Black Panther Party specifically, because Hoover said that the Black Panther Party was the greatest threat to the internal security of the U.S. That's a quote. Right? And so he said that they had to be stopped. They needed to prevent the rise of a black messiah, why Malcolm was killed. They had to prevent the coalition of militant black youth, which is what we have today. They had to prevent people in the black nationalists from gaining any level of respectability. That's why the media attacked them so. People don't know. If anybody who has a child today is benefiting from the legacy of the Black Panther Party, because they created free breakfast programs, free health clinics, food pantries. People can go get clothes and shoes from churches, and and go get groceries, from a bag of groceries from a food pantry. Their child eats breakfast and lunch in school. This United States government was not doing that. If you are a black person, when you have a child, that child is routinely, as a matter of, every black child that's born is tested for sickle cell anemia. This government wasn't doing that. the Black Panther Party was doing that. And so they crushed the Black Liberation Movement and co-opted those survival programs that were part of the 10-point platform and program of the Black Panther Party and took credit for it. So people don't know that when they send their child to school and they eat breakfast, that's because of the Black Panther Party. Because prior to 1966, your child was just hungry. You was just hungry. You didn't have health care. You just was out of luck. It just didn't exist. Now people can go to free health clinics. None of that stuff existed. J. Edgar Hoover said, oh, okay, and then you're teaching children that this country should be doing this, but the country is not doing it, and that there's no reason for poverty to exist. They talk about violence. They talk about, it kills me that they call the Black Panther Party violent, which it was the Black Panther Party for self-defense. That's what it was. Just like Rosa Parks talked about her grandfather believing in self-defense in her kitchen, because she was raised by her grandparents. There were guns on the table because the black men in the South had to protect the black communities and their black families from rolling mobs of white vigilantes and KKK and all of those people that were committing all levels of white terror on black bodies and black families. And so Rosa Parks, who they call this little old lady, she talks about self-defense, right? And so they when J. Edgar Hoover said, we're not going to let them gain any credibility, then we're going to crucify them in the media. So they made people, especially white America, afraid of them. But black people wasn't afraid because black people could see that their child was eating breakfast because of the Black Panther Party. They could see that their neighborhoods were getting safer because they was chasing the drug dealers and the drug trade out of the community, because they said, you're not going to deal drugs over here where these kids are. You're not going to deal drugs in this community. So the government did not want that. They want the madness that exists today. That's why they crushed the Black Panther Party and the Black Liberation Movement. And so all of those things are a legacy of COINTELPRO. The fact that you are hard-pressed to find a black-owned business today. The fact that you turn on the radio and everything is about black women being a bitch and a hoe and black men being niggas and dogs and all of that stuff. Because when they saw how black people come together, and I'm not saying that everybody was involved in the movement, because it's never been. Even on the plantation, everybody didn't want to be free, right? Because people are scared. But this is something that is a product, because when J. Edgar Hoover said that we have to prevent the coalition of black militant youth, and how are we going to do that? But by taking their culture and turning it around and poisoning it. Because before that, first of all, hip-hop music, when it started, they wouldn't even play it on the corporate media. They wouldn't even play it on the radio. It was in the parks. It was people selling tapes. At that time, it was tapes out of their car, walking down the street selling. It was hip-hop music and parties. It was considered, quote, ghetto music. When they saw the power of it, that's when the corporations got involved. And so that's what we have today as a legacy of COINTELPRO. How do we prevent the long-term coalition of militant black youth? We teach them that they are nobody. We teach them that gangster is killing people who look like you. Gangster is not getting the, well, our people don't get the best education anyway, but gangster is not being intelligent. It's smart. You are gangster because how many people you killed, how many people you mashed down or beat down. Gangster is not taking care of your community, making it safe for the children in your community can go outside in the park and play. Gangster is shooting at someone who looks like you, and then you don't even know how to shoot. The reason why we have so many innocent bystanders getting killed, because people don't even know how to shoot. They holding the gun the way they see it on television. That wasn't the case with the Black Panther Party. And so it has been totally distorted. The history of the Black Panther Party has been totally distorted. And people don't see that, and they don't know that there are people who were in. Right now we have 18 people who were in the Black Panther Party who have been in prison for 30 and 40 years. My husband, Sekou Odinga, has been in prison for 33 years. He had escaped. He was one of the Panther 21, which is a historic case here in New York. He went to Africa. He went to Africa and set up in Algeria the international section of the party, traveled throughout the continent and other parts of the world. But he said, my people are catching it right here. I need to come back and be a part of the black freedom struggle in the United States, just like Harriet Tubman. Harriet Tubman escaped. But her freedom didn't mean anything because she understood that her sisters and brothers were still enslaved. And she came back and came back and came back. And Sekou did the same thing. And while he was here, he participated, like other people, in the liberation of Assata Shakur. And so he was convicted of the liberation of Assata Shakur and 2 federal RICO charges, which RICO, from what I understand, means rich in Spanish. The RICO conspiracy laws were created to stop the mob, the mafia. Well, the mafia is still around, but the Black Panther Party was crushed within 6 years, 7 years, no more than 10 years, right? Because by the time it was all said and done in the early 80s, between 68 and 1981, there was something like 30 assassinations. There were dozens of people driven into exile and underground, and that was the beginning of political imprisonment. Because people were framed, people were targeted, people were criminalized, and they were convicted in the court of public opinion and in the courts of their criminal injustice and their criminal injustice system.
So, said your husband. Speak about him as a like, what kind of person is he? You know, because a lot of times I think people might think of Black Panther as this big tough guy. You know, maybe doesn't speak many words, wearing a beret and stuff like that. Explain, like, who is he to you?
Yeah, well, that is unfortunately the macho imagery that is presented of the Black Panther Party. Sekou he's a man. He's a black man who loves his people, who loves his family, who loves his children, his great-grandchildren. He loves the idea of freedom. He loves humanity. He thinks that people should be able to live free and live in their home and out on the street, be able to walk out on the street and not be worried about catching a police bullet or beat down, or that you shouldn't go to bed hungry, or you shouldn't have to worry about a bed to sleep in at night. So he is funny. He is loving. He's deeply spiritual. He's a Muslim. He's an educator, a teacher, because he works with a lot of the young brothers that he's come into contact with over the years who have missed out on having a father in their life for whatever reasons. And so he was committed to people being able to be free and be self-determined, right? To have self-determination. And so he's not the image that they create, because they like to create images. Like when I was a kid, it was the boogeyman. You know, you better be cool, because if you don't, the boogeyman's gonna get you. Just like today, it's so sad to me when I heard a mother say to a child who was not behaving the way she wanted to, "If you don't stop, I'm gonna call the cops." You want the police to come and get you? This mother said that. And so, you know, they love to instill fear. This country instilled fear. That's what they did on the plantations, right? They instilled fear. They took one person who refused to go along with slavery, and they either killed that person in front of everybody or beat them or tortured them within an inch of their life. And they made everybody look. Because they said, this is what's going to happen to you. If you run away and get caught, this is what's going to happen to you. If you try to learn how to read, this is what's going to happen to you. If you resist in any way, this is what's going to happen to you. So then they create these ideas about these dangerous revolutionaries, which revolutionaries are just, as Che Guevara said, motivated by great love for the people. You cannot be a revolutionary and not have great love for the people if you have sacrificed everything. You sacrificed. Sekou sacrificed his life. He sacrificed, unfortunately, his family's life, because his children grew up without their father. right? One of his sons, he was like 12 years old when his father was captured. He now has sons that are older than he was when his father got captured, right? But you do that out of love for the people. You give up. Sunday Al-Akoli was an engineer for NASA. So he could have been like the rest of these bougie Negroes. But he wasn't, right? He saw that there was oppression and injustice of black people, that black people were catching hell from the cradle to the grave, and he said, I cannot sit by. Because I know that this is happening, I cannot sit by and let this happen. So that's love. But that's not the story. That's why what you're doing is so important, right? Because we have to tell our own stories. You mentioned about the Black Panther Party having a newspaper. We have to control the narrative about our history, because white supremacy doesn't teach the true history and legacy of not just the Black Panther Party, but any black history. When people think about Harriet Tubman, all they think about is the Underground Railroad. That woman was bad. She was a medicine woman, because she had to know, running from the south to the north, she had to know, what do you put on people's feet who didn't have shoes on and they was bleeding and cut? How did you heal them? How did you not leave a trail? When people got hungry, what berries, what greens could they eat that wasn't going to make them sick or poison them? What did you give a baby to make them go to sleep so that they wouldn't be crying while the slave traders, the slave catchers are on your heels? So she had to know the earth. So that's a medicine woman. That's a healer. Not only that, they called her the general, because then she worked she was a spy for the Union Army. So there's a lot of stuff that they don't teach. So we who know must teach, because when we don't, then they just refashion the narrative and they give it back to us in a way that suits them, which keeps us ignorant, right? And as Frederick Douglass said, when you educate a man, and I add woman, but when you educate a man, you unfit them to be a slave. So what do? We keep people ignorant, because as long as we keep people ignorant, then we can control what they do. Because I'm controlling what you think. Because if I think that can you curse on here? Yeah. Oh, if I say you a nigger, which a nigger, if you look it up in the dictionary, right, means slovenly, dirty, stupid, lazy. That don't apply to us. Right? But it's also the word that they attach to us on the plantation, right? But if I convince you that you're a nigger and that nigger ain't shit, then I'm gonna treat you like that. If I am convinced that you are not my brother, which who knows what you could have been, how you was connected to me, because 300 years ago, maybe our mothers were connected, and we got separated because of the slave plantation. So one child got sold off to Tennessee, and another child got sold off to Georgia. They had children, but you still family, because you live in different places don't make you not family. But if I make you see that ain't got nothing to do with me. So how am I gonna convince people that nigga ain't shit? How much convince people that black person's life who looks like me is not worth living? That I don't care whether that person eats, I don't care if they have a bed, that ain't my child. Whatever they do, that's their business. How am I going to do that? I'm going to take their culture and I'm going to twist it and make it ugly and dirty and vile, and I'm going to make it poison, and I'm going to give it back to them, and they're going to think that that's who they are, because we're going to tell them. Because the people who don't know who they are, then you allow other people to tell you who you are. When you know who you are, they can't tell you who you are. Identity. And so Sekou is a man who knows who he is and pass that on to everybody he came into contact with. And so that is a threat to the United States. So they talk all of this stuff about education. If it wasn't so, then education would be free. Harvard wouldn't cost $50,000 and people can't afford to go to college, because it would be a right, like in Cuba. It's a right. Other countries, it's a right. You get to go, not based on your class, how much money you have. So living in this neighborhood, you can't live in this neighborhood if you can't pay $5,000 a month for a 3-bedroom apartment. I don't pay that, because where I live is still, quote, affordable housing. So certain things are made for certain people. And who are those certain people? Well, this is a country that is built on the genocide, of one group, the indigenous native people that were here, and the enslavement of another, the Africans that were brought here. How is it ever going to be equal if it was built on genocide and enslavement? But they don't teach our children that. So our children don't know that. So they grow up believing all this mythology and all these lies. And anytime someone speaks out, then they criminalize and crucify and demonize that person and do the same thing that COINTELPRO did, prevent that person from getting any level of respectability in their corporations' media. And so then people don't know. So that's why independent media becomes so important, because independent media can show something else. But then it's like, how do we get people to know about the independent media? Because this propaganda, this is a war. Wars are not just bombs and drones dropped, and you asked me about Israel. It's not just bombs and drones dropped in Palestine, in Iraq, and in Afghanistan. It's poverty. It's that children go to school and they are checked and like they're going to prison. They got to go through metal detectors. And they can't tell me that that's necessary, because every school shooting that has ever taken place in this country takes place in a state, in a city that is predominantly white, and there are no metal detectors. So they tell people that violence is a black thing, when the history of this country is violence is a white thing, because they were violent against their own people.
One thing, I went to a school where there was metal detectors, and putting people that you're paying a little bit above minimum wage in charge of keeping guns out of the place isn't really effective at all. Mm. But I wanted to get into also, you kind of mentioned it, parenting. Like, how important is parenting? And what's the importance of educating and parenting our community and children, grandchildren, etc.?
Well, parenting is so important, because you're sending someone out into the world. We are children. I was once a child. I haven't been a child in a long time. I'm an adult the rest of my life. But what happens to us as children can kind of set the stage for certain things. So if I'm a child that grows up with violence, if I'm a physical violence or the violence of poverty, the violence of hopelessness, the violence of trauma that I see every day, because not only do I see people being killed in my neighborhood by police, and I see people being killed in my neighborhood by people who look like me. So where do I go to be safe? And then when I'm home, I'm called names, I'm yelled at. Nobody is taking the time to talk to me. I have my granddaughter right here. I talk to her. I don't yell at her. I don't talk at her, because I want her to know how important she is, how much I value who she is as a little person. That unfortunately, a lot of our parenting stuff comes from slavery. You know, women, we didn't have control of our bodies. We didn't have control of our children. And so we often wanted our children to disappear. We wanted them to sit there, but we wanted them to disappear. So we wanted them to be quiet, because we didn't want them to call attention to themselves. So we beat them so that the slave master wouldn't do it, so that the slave master wouldn't sell them. And then we just saw the trauma of that beating all the time. So that has translated, because African people didn't, and indigenous people didn't beat their children. They just had conversations with them. Because when you can speak to them in a language that they understand, and you talk to them, and they will get it. But we have learned the violence of abuse. And so when you add the legacy of slavery, people want us to forget that, but you cannot. It's like if you I went to Italy, the building is leaning tower of Pisa or something. You can't straighten that up. That building is going to be like that until 1,000 years from now, or if it ever crumbles, I don't know. That's the way the building is, right? Because the foundation, it's the same thing. So we have to go to the foundation of stuff, and this has been a hostile place and a dysfunctional place for us, and so we have learned how to be hostile and dysfunctional, even with ourselves and our children. And then when you add that You add the so-called war on drugs and how it took black men and black women from the family. You talk about heroin, you talk about crack cocaine, right? How are we going to hold families together when the government is pushing drugs into the community to destroy the community? Because when we have revolutionary movements going, that's when they put heroin in the community. Right? And then they put crack in the community in order to fuel. Ronald Reagan was the president then, and they wanted to overthrow the government in Nicaragua. They had to raise money to buy arms. So what they do? They flooded urban communities, black and brown communities, with crack cocaine. And then they created laws, right? The Rockefeller drug laws, the laws that said, okay, 4.5 ounces of crack cocaine, you go into prison for 25 years to life. 4.5 ounces of powdered cocaine, you get a slap on the wrist. So from the slave plantation to the war on black liberation to the so-called war on drugs to what we have now have all participated in the destruction of the black family. And unless you are a student of history, and I don't mean formally in college, but unless you are just a person who loves to read and believes like Malcolm, I'm just going to learn because it's my responsibility to learn. Unless you are that kind of person, you won't know this, and then we don't have a context, right? People always say, well, how could they do this? They've been doing it since 1619. Actually 1492, when Columbus came and started committing genocide against the indigenous people. So they've had 600 years of practice. It ain't how could they do this. If I don't recognize your humanity, then I can do anything I want to you because I'm beating down on this table in the same way I'm going to beat down on you because this table is not human. So you are not human. And so how am I going to convince people that you are not human? I'm going to use every weapon at my disposal. So I'm going to use the court system. I'm going to use the school system. I'm going to use the media. I'm going to use the newspaper. I'm going to use the magazines. I'm going to use the music. Everywhere you go in this world, black people have to fight for their humanity. Because we have been so dehumanized by a system that has been dehumanizing us since 1492. So that's how they could let a George Zimmerman off. That's how they could shoot Amadou Diallo 41 times, 19 of the bullets hit him. One of those bullets hit him in the bottom of his foot. So that meant that he was laying down on the ground. He had fallen in that little vestibule, and they were still shooting. That's how you can shoot at a Sean Bell 50 times. That's how you can kill a 70-year-old grandmother because you're supposed to be serving some eviction notice because you don't see our humanity. That's how you can keep our children in solitary confinement. That's how you can sentence children to life without the possibility of parole. You 16 years old. What could you ever do at 16 years old that would warrant you never being able to redeem yourself? That you should, at 16, die in prison, 70, 80, however many years long you live. Jaleel Muntakim, one of our political prisoners, he was 19 years old when he was captured. He's in his 60s now. He's 19. We have a political prisoner that's 86 years old, and they denied him parole. It's a wicked system. You know how Rastas call it Babylon? Mm-hmm. That ain't no lie. Mm-hmm. And so the only way you ask, how can they do this, is when you don't know. Because if you know, then you say, what are we going to do to stop it? Because those are the questions that we have to be raising. What are we going to do to make my granddaughter safe? As a child or as a grown woman? What are we going to do so that our children have a decent education? What are we going to do to stop homelessness?
So what as far as the political prisoner struggle today, what are we, or what is in the works to do? What are the different organizations? I know there's the
Jericho movement for amnesty and recognition of U.S. held political prisoners.
Yeah, what movements are there to move forward? First for the political prisoners, and after.
Sadly, there is no movement. What we have are pockets of resistance, right? We have the Sekou Odinga Defense Committee that I am the co-coordinator of, which we're challenging New York State's custody of him. So that means that we're doing an education campaign, like having this interview. We do an education campaign and we do a fundraising campaign. That's why we have this CD called Freedom Ain't Free, to raise money to take his case into the courts. Because in the absence of a movement, then we have to fight it in the courts. So we have the Jericho movement for amnesty and recognition, and then there are individuals. Some people have defense committees. So the major task right now is just educating people that they are political prisoners. Because this country has, with this corporate media and its courts and this police state, they have so mesmerized people that they are free because they can buy a flat screen TV or a $600 phone, or you have these rap celebrities telling them about all of these designer labels. That we have to do an education campaign, and that's the most primary thing. Like Malcolm said it, Dr. John Henry Clark said it, we turn our children over them to educate them. What do we think they're going to do? Do we really think that if you send your child to their schools, they're going to educate your children to overthrow, to change this, to build liberated communities, to build communities that are drug-free, that are safe, that are community controlled? They're not going to do that. And so it starts with education. And so we have to even educate people that there are people in prison from the 60s and 70s who were fighting for liberation. That's all they was fighting for, but they was criminalized. So that's our major task. COINTELPRO has been successful in that it has crushed the movement and left people ignorant, right? So people don't know. So we have to first educate people. We have to bring the inside out. When people organize around homelessness, around police terror, around education, around healthcare, we try to be there so we can say, well, we're political prisoners on this. Because the 10-point platform and program of the Black Panther Party had every single one of those issues in it. So how can you talk about these things and not include the people who were inside because they were fighting for those things? So we have to have a context. Right now, most people don't have a context. They don't even understand how this football player, is being used to distract them from everything that's going on. Don't let people focus on Ferguson. Don't let people focus on any other stuff that's happening. Let them focus on, and I'm a feminist and I'm a woman. So I have deep issues with violence against women. Even when they say she doesn't mind, or she whatever, why does she stay? Whatever the reasons, I have issues with men who brutalize women, right? But I also understand that in the context that this is a country that likes to have sensationalized news and get people distracted. While they're distracted people on that, they're doing, trust me, all manner of stuff. Barack Obama, their love guy, just signed a bill that cut like $85 billion out of food stamps. That's hungry children. So what are those families going to do? So they create the conditions of poverty, and then when people try to survive that poverty, because one thing Black people know how to do is make a way out of nowhere. So if I don't have a, quote, legitimate job, I'm a hustler. So if that hustling is selling my body, if that hustling is selling drugs, if that hustling is going into the grocery store to steal a package of meat so I can feed my child, I'm going to do it. And then what am I going to do? They're going to be waiting for me to send me into prison. So they create the conditions, and then they sit back and say, well, you shouldn't have done that. Well, people need to have employment, people need to have housing, people need to have food, people need to have safety. And if the government is not providing that, then what do they expect people to do? And it's going to get worse, because it's getting worse, right? More and more people are getting laid off. And, Martin Luther King said that what doesn't affect someone directly affects them indirectly. I'm walking down the street, someone doesn't know me from a can of paint. They're hungry. They got children at home who are crying, who are hungry. They look at me, they think I have something. Whoop! I'm going because they want my pocketbook. But I think I'm safe because I'm college educated, I'm professional. I don't live in that neighborhood, but we're all connected. And that's where the education comes in, to let people know, about the connections that we have, right? We have white and black and brown political prisoners because they understood that it was class. It's race always. We can't ever forget that. But it's also class. It's capitalism. But they make people think, people compare. They say, oh, they don't like, I work with young people. Oh, Cuba is communist. I don't like that. Why? Because they've been taught not to. Well, this is democracy. I like living in a democratic nation. I said, democracy is the politics of the country. Communism is the economics. So you can't compare democracy and communism. But people don't even know that, right? But at least in communism, everybody has each according to their need and ability. George Bush was an idiot, but he became president because his father had been president. So rich wealth is passed down from generation to generation. Oppression is passed down from generation to generation. I don't ever forget that white people are the descendants of slave owners. And as an African person, I am a descendant of enslaved Africans. That doesn't mean that I don't like white people. No. I'm not going to be one of those corny white people that say, oh, I got black friends. But I know enough to know that I'm not talking about individuals. I'm talking about the institutions of oppression. I'm talking about the institution of race and class oppression. I have no ability to deny someone a job. I have no ability to deny someone justice. I have no ability to deny someone a bank loan to either buy a house or fix up their house. I have no ability to control people's lives. So when people say that, oh, you're racist, no, I'm not. Because I have I can be prejudiced, and I'm not even that. Because if you show me that you are a white person that is down with fighting against racism, we got it going on. But if you are a white person that just takes your privilege and uses it for your own interest, and then they kill a Sean Bell. I can't tell you how many white people said when Sean Bell was murdered, and there was all these protests around the city, well, we got to wait to see all the facts. What facts? They shot at the man 50 times. What facts? What could he be? He was sitting in the car. What facts? If they shot a dog, dogs have more rights than black men. Because if those police killed a black man, a dog, in the same way that they shot Mike Brown, Amadou Diallo, Sean Bell, or a black woman, Eleanor Bakers, what's the girl, I can't remember her name right now, in Flatbush, that they said she was stealing a car. They shot her in broad daylight in Flatbush, right? If they killed a dog or a cat, they'd be like that football player. Right? Vic, yes, who went to jail for boxing dogs or fighting dogs. So they dehumanize us and they justify it. So I'm not against any human being. I'm against injustice.
So as far as I think I've seen there's something like your husband has about 18 kids or 19 kids. He has a lot of children.
He has 19 grandchildren.
19 grandchildren.
Yeah, he has nine children.
Okay.
Well, he had.
So I would imagine, some of them probably are really interested in, in the revolutionary struggle and stuff like that, and some of them probably aren't interested. Right now, I can't remember exactly who. I think someone was a rapper. Was in a group with Tupac and the Outlaws. I can't remember exactly the character's name, but it was one of the members of the Outlaws that was in Tupac. It was also part of he's also descended from political prisoners and stuff like that. So, you have people like that are building careers, based upon these types of things that they probably learned from, their grandparents that knew this, that, and that. So, for the most, and I've seen that there's also a dinner come up, that I'm at CC, the dinner for tribute for family and stuff like that. And the families, like the children, are the children as involved as, their parents? Like, how does that go?
Well, when you're talking about the son, you're talking about Yafeo was his name. He was murdered, right? But his name, his stage name, performance name was Yaki Gaddafi, right? He was murdered. And so, of course, in his music and in Tupac's music, if you listen to it, you'll hear Tupac talk about Mutulu, you'll hear him talk about Sekou Odinga, you'll hear him talk about Geronimo Jijaga Pratt before he crossed over to the other side. He was in prison for 27 years as a political prisoner before a legal case that Johnny Cochran was a part of helped to win his release. It's challenging, right, because the families of our political prisoners have been so traumatized. There are children who remember guns pointed at them at 3 years old. They didn't care that they were children. They were the children of revolutionaries, right? And so children of black people, because they do that. They take SWAT to bust down, to serve a warrant for drugs. Right, and look, they killed like Ayanna Jones in Detroit, or Flint. They just threw the grenade into the house, and she, so they don't care, right? But the children have been so traumatized. People have, especially, when they were looking for people. Sekou says that the FBI and the police pushed his mother to support the Black Panther Party, that's what they did, right? But the behavior makes you like, this is crazy. I got to do something, because they would come to her house and bang on her door, knock her door in, helicopters overhead. If you don't tell your son to turn himself in, when we find him, we're going to kill him. So what else is a mother going to do but want to protect her son? So children, they didn't discriminate if you were elderly. They didn't discriminate if you were blind. They didn't discriminate if you were a baby in diapers. And so that level of trauma, knowing that when Sekou was captured, he was tortured, right? Because, of course, they were trying to find the whereabouts of Assata Shakur and Abdul Majid, one of our other political prisoners. And so they think waterboarded at Guantanamo Bay started there. No, they did that in 1981. On October 23rd, 1981, when they captured Sekou Odinga, they waterboarded him, right? They beat him. They put they took turns. They took shifts from one shift to the next. They took turns, like they would put cigarettes and cigars out in his flesh to try to get answers to what they wanted, right? And they beat him into a 3-month hospital stay, which he still has health issues from today. He had to stay in hospital for 3 months, and he still wasn't healed, but the judge made him go on trial. So when you are a child and you see that level of trauma, it makes it very hard to be involved in the ways. And then they see the opportunism. There's so many people that claim their love for political prisoners and history, and they say that they're all that, but they're not doing the work. So we are nowhere near where we'd like to be. There are families involved. We do that dinner, Malcolm X Commemoration Committee. We do that dinner every year to let the families know who have been dealing with the imprisonment of their loved one, and who have made contributions to the Black freedom struggle, not by choice, but just because they're the mother of, the son of, the daughter of, right? So we do the dinner to say thank you, that we recognize your sacrifice, we recognize your commitment, because they're going up to visit and to send commissary money and do all those things when everybody else is going along about their lives, right? So under those kinds of situations, sometimes that trauma prevents people from getting involved in ways that other people would like. But one of Sekou's sons is on the committee, with us. So we would like more, but it's understandable that the level of trauma makes it difficult. And then they see that there's a thankless people, because their fathers and their mothers sacrificed them. And then there's people that don't even know about them. So as a child, why am I going to want to do that if I see that all the sacrifices and all the work and everything that my family member, my mother or father contributed, and the average person walking down the street don't know anything about them? What's going to make me want to do that? So it's a lot of reasons why we don't have families as involved as we would like.
What? All right, you said that your husband was tortured and stuff like that, and there's a record of COINTELPRO. Have any of the political prisoners have used COINTELPRO, and when you look at the documentation, it's pretty blatant with different avenues they went through to falsify cases and etc. Has anyone been successful, or has at least tried to use that to free themselves?
Deruba Ben Wahad was a New York State political prisoner. He did 19 years in prison, and for a crime that they convicted him where they knew he didn't commit. And so his attorney was able to, after 19 years, get him released, get the conviction overturned, because he showed painstakingly with over 700,000 documents how 700,000 or 300,000, some astronomical amount of documents, that Deruba Ben Wahad was a target of COINTELPRO. Geronimo Gijaga Pratt, who was in California, there was a murder that they convicted him of that they knew he didn't do because he was in a whole nother city because the FBI was following him. So they knew that he wasn't there, but they tried him and convicted him, and he was in prison for 27 years before they was finally able to get his conviction thrown out. So yeah, there have been people, but see, that takes money. That's why we have this fundraising campaign for Sekou, because in the absence of a movement, we have to go to the courts to challenge their convictions, to challenge the illegalities of their trials, right? The judge wouldn't allow, in Sekou's case, wouldn't allow the testimony of him being in the hospital. He said, well, you could have did that to yourself. So they wouldn't allow that. So yeah, people have had to go to the courts because we don't have a movement. So that goes back to children. Why would I get involved when the people don't? People are not appreciative. The people don't know what sacrifices people have made, right? My child can eat breakfast in school, whether they want to or not. They can, because of people like Sekou Odinga and other people that were in the Black Panther Party.
And well, you already went over what's important about donations, but going to, there's links to these gentlemen that are in prison. How does that help them? What do they hope to gain or give in that situation when you're writing?
Educate. It's about making those inside-out connections. The worst thing you can do, and I say this to your people who are listening, the worst thing you can do is have a person in prison who doesn't get mail, who doesn't get visits, who has nobody to call, because then the prison guards know that they can do whatever they want and nobody's going to be checking, right? So you write, you visit, you have them call, so you maintain those ties that bind between the inside and the outside. And as far as our political prisoners, what it teaches, what it lets them know is that even though it's been 30 or 40 years, that there is still people who are learning about them and want to learn more about them. And then as far as sending money to them, that's always necessary, because the same tomatoes that we have to pay $2.99 a pound for, they have to pay $2.99 a pound for. Only difference is they're making maybe 50 cents a day, 7 cents an hour, right? So, but they still have to buy the same things. And in New York State prison, you can't even send people stuff anymore. They have to buy everything. So if people don't have money, which many people don't, then they just do without, or people are sharing. So the commissary is important because it helps people to live on the inside, which is also very difficult because our political prisoners don't come from people who have a whole lot of money. They was getting down with struggle because they wanted to change the lives of their people. So the same ways that people struggle every day, their families struggle every day. So now you have to take care of this family on the outside, and you also have this loved one on the inside. So what bill doesn't get paid because you send a commissary? What bill doesn't get paid because you're taking a $55 round trip bus journey upstate and you spending $20 in the vending machines to eat? And then if you have a child going with you because you want that son or daughter to visit their father or their mother, so you got to pay for them. They don't ride for free. You got to pay for them. So going upstate to visit a loved one is expensive. So how are black people supposed to keep their connections. When you talk about children and parenting, how do you parent if you're in prison and you're relegated to half an hour clicks or 15-minute clicks phone calls? And now it's only if you have money on the phone. And well, New York State just did the thing where you can get cell phone calls. Because before, up until a couple of months ago, you had to have a landline phone. Well, many people don't have a landline. They only have a cell phone. So that means that they couldn't talk to their family members. So it is so ugly. I can't even put words to it sometimes, right? But I know history, and of course I don't know everything, but I know enough to know that this is how our ancestors lived. They were up against a mighty empire, just like we are. But they had the wherewithal to dream about freedom, and that's what I do. Because I think about my granddaughter and my grandson, and what's it going to be like when my granddaughter is my age? What kind of world am I leaving? And did I try to make a difference so that her life can be a little better? And what did I teach her by living by example? Right? So that's why we fight. Because it's the only thing we have. It's the only thing that we have is to fight. Because when we don't fight, then we accept what they do to us. And that is unacceptable. To accept what they do to our children. To accept how they murder our people in the streets in cold blood and leave their bodies in the street for hours. It's unacceptable what they do to children, black and brown children, in the school system in this country. It's unacceptable. So those of us who know, we fight in all the ways that we know how. And educating people is one of the most powerful ways to do that. So I thank you for having us on here to talk about this, because it's really important.
Thank you for teaching me. And in closing, your website and anything that you want to plug.
Yeah, so I didn't even mention, we have a CD called Freedom Ain't Free, and it's a tribute to the Black freedom struggle and Black and New African political prisoners and prisoners of war. So it's hip hop. We got M1 on it. We got Rebel Diaz. It's a hot CD. It's multi-generational. Sekou is on it. People talking about him. I'm on it. And it's to help us raise money for his legal defense. And people can visit our website at www.sekouodinga.com. They can email me at info@sekouodinga.com. We have a Facebook page. We have all the ways to try to reach people, from the media but there's nothing like one-on-one. I'm always available to come out and talk to people wherever, community organizations, school, wherever, right? Oh, can I get my phone number too, just in case? No. Okay. Okay. Yes. So we say freedom ain't free, and